we are at the office at Art in These Times, which is a gallery in these times, a publication here in Chicago. And we're about to have the release party for the Celebrating People's History, Iraq Veterans Against the War, 10 Years of Fighting for Peace and Justice portfolio. Yeah, well, this poster project is about people's history. It's not about elites' history. And the history or the stories that we're getting in the media are all these elite, quote-unquote, soldiers or service members. And I think that presents a very distorted perspective of these occupations, because the occupations weren't conducted just by special forces. It was conducted by thousands and thousands of regular troops. And I think our relationship to the military and our relationship to the experiences of the Iraqis and the Afghans is a lot different than perhaps someone that's in the special forces, or a general, or an officer, a media pundit, or a military spokesperson. And that's what we're hearing. And I think it's time that we reclaim that narrative and hear from the folks that drove the trucks of the occupation, that were the MPs of the occupation, that walked the streets on a daily basis, that sat in guard towers on a daily basis. Those are the stories, the anxiety and boredom of the war that was altogether dehumanizing and destructive, I think is really what we need to hear those voices.
This is a print called "Every Bomb Dropped on Iraq Explodes Along the Gulf Coast." It's a print that I did with my collaborator Sarah Ross, and the title of the print comes from a slogan that was used by the Iraq Veterans Against the War and Hurricane Katrina survivors and other anti-war organizations who organized a march from Mobile, Alabama to New Orleans. And they drew their slogan from a series of speeches that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King gave, where he was explicitly linking militarism and war to economic injustice and racism at home in the United States. And I'm trying to remember the exact words that he used, but it was to the effect that every bomb dropped in Vietnam exploded here at home, and he was explicitly talking about the devastation that was happening in cities at the time in the late 60s due to economic restructuring and other things at the time. And that became our inspiration for the print.
Iraq Veterans Against the War was going to turn 10 years old, which was really scary to me, considering when I first got involved with Iraq Veterans Against the War, I thought we were going to be ending the war and bringing all the service members home, and that was going to be it, and we'd be able to pack up. But instead, what has come about is a state of endless war and a state of perpetual violence, and that's not just abroad but also here in the communities at home, and militarism has expanded here as well as abroad, and that impact is not just on the communities, it's primarily on the communities that are directly affected by occupation, but it's also within the veterans community and the after effects of war. And so this portfolio is trying to track our 10-year history, really to lay a groundwork to acknowledge that there was a lot of work that was done that I think is easily forgotten. And I want to hold that up and make sure this project uplifts that and celebrates that history and the accomplishments that we have had. This whole project, celebrating people's history, was Iraq Veterans Against the War, was inspired out of popular posters that were used in the 60s and 70s to educate different communities about different struggles that were happening and to inspire people to take action. And there's some of the old Winter Soldier newspapers that really captured the history of Vietnam veterans against the war. They had amazing posters that they had in all of their publications, and I thought they were really inspiring, and I thought it was a great way to directly communicate with folks. And I created a past portfolio called the War is Trauma portfolio, and Iraq Veterans Against the War used those prints in teach-ins. So we'd pass out the prints and let people read them and tell us what they thought about what they meant. And all of a sudden, we have folks that haven't been engaging with the issues of war and militarism, engaging with it and sharing their perspectives because there's a tool to start a discussion. And so that's what these are. They're these little glimpses into a history, into the stories, into the experiences of people's lives, and how we can celebrate those histories and raise them up. Because as American Sniper and the Special Forces kind of narrative of the current wars overrides a lot of the anti-war work that has happened, I think there's a lot of work to be done in the cultural sphere to shift that narrative and put it back on all the service members that stood up and refused to fight, that spoke out against these wars. And really it was the popular perspective. Over 70% of service members in Afghanistan and Iraq towards the ends of the occupation were opposed to them.